And before you know where you are, you're realizing that you're sitting in silence. We're talking in silence. You're connected to perfect peace through your feet on the ground. Well, what's this? Presence. Presence of what? Presence of infinite peace, infinite life, infinite love, Spirit, God. How to find God? Common sense, my dear.
Hello, I'm John from Pure Unintentional ASMR. This is our first ever unintentional interview. About 2 weeks ago, I put a poll up on our YouTube channel asking you who would you like to see us interview. It was a slightly disingenuous poll as this interview had already been arranged, but I knew what the answer would be and it was unanimous. So I have travelled from the west coast of Canada to the centre of England to Bakewell to meet my first ever guest who needs absolutely no introduction on my channel. We're in the same venue from the original interviewer. We have the same cameraman. We have a much worse interviewer, but most importantly, we have John Butler here again. John, thank you so much for doing this. I have many questions for you, but the first, I believe when you did that interview with Ian McNay on Conscious TV, you were very reluctant to do it. You didn't want the publicity.
No.
Now you have 200,000 subscribers, 210,000 subscribers on YouTube. By my rough estimation, your videos have been viewed 50 million times. So how does that feel, knowing that this was not something you ever really wanted?
Well, at first I was bewildered and what does it feel like? Well, I don't really feel anything, really. Yes, I think I could say that if it's been of interest, what I'm glad is that I've been able to share what I love. And that makes me feel humbly grateful.
I mean, it's essentially the size of a packed out Wembley arena watching your videos, subscribing to you. I guess that doesn't sink in when you're...
Doesn't really sink in, dear.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many people's lives you've changed, and I'm very conscious that you are a very humble man. You don't like to consider yourself a teacher. Yeah. You talk about ego and the problems that ego brings to people. I don't want to make your problem worse, but you have most certainly changed my life. When I first came across your interview with Ian McNay on Conscious TV back in, it was February of 2018 when I first came across it, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. It was the biggest challenge I had. I've had a lot of challenges in my life, but figuring out what I wanted to do with my life was the number one. And through your video and this completely accidental thing, I now have a calling that I never could have imagined. So that's it. Just a thank you to you for that.
Well, let's say thanks be to God and be safe.
Be to God indeed. You seem to be a man that's very in tune with yourself and with nature. Did that come naturally, or is that something you've had to work on?
Well, I've always felt close to nature. I was brought up in the country and I've spent most of my active years as a farmer, so nothing's more natural for me than to be working alone in the fields. I never liked machinery, I like to work by hand, so to be hour after hour after hour alone, silent in the field, which I loved, working with the plants and the earth, which I loved, that comes to me very naturally. I still take great comfort from looking at the grass. I love to touch the earth. The second part of your question was what, dear? Could you repeat it, please?
Just how you came to the place, basically. How did you come to finding stillness?
Oh, you asked me, was I at rest with myself?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that was more difficult. I went through all a young man's agonies. No, in fact, I was probably more mixed up than most people are even today, tormented by questions of what I should do between duty, what was right, or what I felt was selfish. The social attitude, the social approach to these things has changed very much in my lifetime. I was brought up. None of the self questions that are now so widespread, self development, self fulfillment, none of this was ever considered. It was all about being unselfish. This was the only mention of self I'd ever heard of was being selfish or unselfish. And of course, selfishness was one of the worst things you could be, self-centered. And in many ways, because I didn't really, I also felt a misfit in society. I never really felt very comfortable in the world of man. I wanted to escape back to my beloved fields, really. So I felt a bit of a social failure. And so this caused me much difficulty when I was a young man. That's through much of my life, this sense of not really living up to what was expected of me. It's the most bizarre happening that completely unexpectedly and against my wishes, in later age, I find myself as a public figure. It was.
Does it give you any comfort that, when you thought, I think I've had the same experience. We all think we're misfits, we don't belong.
Yes.
I feel like everyone has a lesson that we didn't learn.
Well, actually, in some ways, you see, as I've become, I'm a bit shy to use words like spiritual, but as it always seems to me a presumption, an unworthy presumption. But insofar as spirit has become more real to me, that shows up, you see, what I like to call sin, which is the dark side of human nature. So in many ways, the more spiritually developed we are, the more we also realize the shadow side, which you can call sin. And so I'm more aware of my failings now than I am of my successes, so-called successes, which is a very good state to be in. And humility is hopefully a consequence of that. Because after all, if the aim is towards this infinite something that we refer to God as God, what is man? Man doesn't measure up very well, does he? So,
So yeah, you were talking about, or you have talked in your books and with Ian McNay about there were times when you needed to escape, you needed to get away from the situation you were in. And I think a lot of people feel like that. A lot of people feel trapped. They feel like there's no other way out. And then there are times where things are hard and we feel like running away and escaping when we shouldn't. We should stay. There's certain things worth fighting for. And I wondered, in your life, how did you decide whether it was worth staying or leaving? When did you know that it was the right time
you
to?
do know, dear. I think we muddle through, and I think moments of clarity are quite rare. I think most of the time we don't know which way to go, and maybe sometimes things happen. I don't know that I really decided almost anything in my life. Things happen, don't they? And It's extraordinary looking back. Have I decided anything of consequence in my life? I'm not sure I have. I think things have just happened, really, for better or worse. Escaping, well, that for me was always just, if it was a room full of talkative people, often it meant just going outside. Yes, I've gone abroad. I never got scared for civilization. I remember as a young man, one of my dreams, I had two dreams: to be a cowboy and to see the world before men messed it up. And I was very lucky. Dad sent me out to Australia, where I did both. I remember climbing a hill in Australia, looking all around, and no sign that man had ever been there. Strangely enough, it didn't quite come up to expectations. I suppose I'd been pretty near that situation for quite a long period beforehand. And yes, I love the old song, "Don't Fence Me In." That's been a guiding instinct throughout my life. I find I get claustrophobic really in big cities, or I used to get claustrophobic in big cities, or people talking. It's long to get out. Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you just have to open the door, or open the window, get a breath of fresh air, do what's available, do what's possible.
If circumstances were different, and let's say you had a family living in a city, for work you needed to live in a city.
Yes.
How do you think you would approach finding stillness without that connection to nature?
Well, stillness is something that came much later in life, John. I didn't find stillness until many, many years past. I didn't call it stillness. Stillness has become another rather fashionable word in spiritual talk. For me, it was just nature. Nature is naturally quiet, isn't it? And when you look at a tree, for example, it naturally brings you to something you could call stillness, at least in relation to normal human condition of agitation. Look at the grass, that immediately, or look at the earth, because the earth is still, isn't it? The easiest way to find stillness is just keep your feet on the ground. Perfect stillness, bingo, no problem.
But how did you know when you first?
Naturally, dear.
Naturally.
You just feel better.
Do you think you were experiencing it before then? Like, was there a time when you just recognized and was like, oh, that's what stillness is, or that's?
Well, I think it was really only when complicated people started talking to me about it that what's always seemed obvious sort of got a name and a label. It became, how do you find stillness? Up to then, I don't think it ever occurred to me. It was just natural. Common sense. Honestly. Men make it all so complicated. Once you start writing books and talking to people, talking, invariably takes you away from common sense. Because once you start talking, you get into the head, and you lose contact with first of all, the ground, Mother Earth. You don't see what's in front of your nose. You don't hear what's naturally the sounds of nature around you, and all you live in a man-made world, a man-made world in this bubble, or in this prison of your own mind. This becomes your reality, and there's no common sense in there. Common sense requires feeling, seeing, and hearing. They're our main senses, aren't they? And when you're thinking, you're not connected with any of them, are you? Talking, you may listen to the sound of your own voice, but what use is that? First of all, you see like what's in front of you, but then if you keep looking, you see deeper into it. And before you know where you are, you're realizing that you're sitting in silence. We're talking in silence. You're connected to perfect peace through your feet on the ground. Well, what's this? Presence. Presence of what? Presence of infinite peace, infinite life, infinite love, spirit, God. How to find God? Common sense, my dear.
That's a very good one. That's very good. I wanted to ask you more about the ego. If you found fame, I mean fame, if you want to put it that way, but later in life, if you had found fame at, let's say, 25, if you had become a YouTuber at 25, do you think it would have affected you differently? The attention, the people coming to interview you, and
Perhaps I never would have been at 25. It's maybe at 25 I made the great mistake of thinking I knew. Now I'm old, I have more confidence in saying I don't know.
it's a hard thing to admit for most people.
I'm more ready to admit my stupidity, my human ignorance.
I know I'm kind of jumping around to different places, but modern technology was something I wanted to ask you about. We live in a world of smartphones, the internet, everyone's connected constantly. It distracts us, it causes anxiety with people, comparing yourself to everyone else. But on the other hand, then, technology has allowed people like ourselves to make a living, and also you can now reach people that you would never have been able to reach, and people are able to access people like yourselves from all corners of the earth that they would never have been able to before. So I wondered, how do you ever think about that modern technology, or about how it impacts us, both good and bad? Do you have any opinion on it?
I don't do much thinking these days at all, strange to say. When people ask me what I think, I'm always a bit floored by that question, and I think somewhere along the way I've just gotten bored with thinking. It's so much I think simpler, really, to go beyond thinking. This is what meditation does. It takes you. You see, thinking is just a layer of consciousness, like here. I don't think much about what's happening in my tummy. My tummy is sort of digesting whatever I put into it today, and it more or less takes place by itself. But what I've come to realize gradually over the years is that my head, my mind, is really like a sort of mental digestive system, just digesting what's ever come into it. And it's a sort of fairly robotic thing. It just chews over what's in the news, what people have said. And I think I just got a bit bored with it, really. And you see, it's so much more interesting beyond the mind, really. That's where the big stuff is. This don't fence me in. It always sort of leads me to the stars more, you know. I've just recently been lucky enough to be at sea for a few days and look out over the sea, and it's so big, and mind and attention is drawn to the horizon where the sea merges into the sky, and then beyond that into the infinite, you know. And in contrast, the ship seems so small, like a little prison there of people talking, and human entertainment, and all that's encompassed by the world of man. How small it is in comparison to the greatness of life. And perhaps I've just been greedy. I've always longed for the greatness, freedom, for infinite love, the love that never says no. So I'm just naturally, they say God calls, respond to that call. And when people say, what do you think? It sort of brings me back into a world I've more or less grown out of, thank God.
Makes sense, yeah.
I don't find much interest really in the world of thinking any longer. I've left it behind somewhere.
That's great. I feel...
And on the other hand, you see, this is, as it were, after thinking, and before thinking, well, common sense, my dear. If you use your common sense, your mind is perfectly quiet, totally quiet. If you're doing something with attention, even if it's just peeling an apple, or washing up, or scratching your head, if you do it with attention, you'll find your mind is perfectly quiet. You're not thinking. The trouble is we don't do things with attention. We're usually divided, thinking. And that's why there's so little craftsmanship today. And most of what you see produced is surely is careless. See, people dress carelessly, don't they? It has almost become fashionable to be dressed carelessly, casually we call it. Casualness has become, well, that's another word for inattention, very, very, well, maybe that's stretching the point a bit, but yes. I love the phrase TLC, tender loving care, which implies attention, really attending to something, carefully, working carefully, taking care of things.
Yeah.
Which is natural. It's not a thinking process, is it? It's living carefully, giving attention.
But how do you, it might seem very easy for you, or this might seem like a silly question, but I'm someone who overthinks constantly. I just think and think and think. And I, at the moment anyway, I don't know any other way of being.
No. Well, I'm afraid that's a very common situation today, this mental hyperactivity. And it's a great problem for many people. How do you overcome it? Well, not everybody will dedicate themselves to serious meditation, but it's very simple. I've got no better advice, dear, than common sense. Let's come back to feet on the ground. If we were 100% aware, you'd be so full of light, you might even explode. We just don't know what it is to be aware. You might even find something glorious. Just to look at something.
I think that's a lot of the success of ASMR has come from attention.
Yes.
People love the kind of personal attention.
Absolutely. Yes, I think it's very much connected, John. What brings us? It's about coming to rest. Now, most of us know a bit about physical rest. We call it relaxation. What we know less about is mental rest. What is rest? It's really letting go, isn't it? You can't stop the mind because it's digesting the process. You can't stop your tummy digesting, then what can you stop your mind? People waste a lot of time trying to control the mind. But what you can do is let go your attachment to the mind. I use the phrase just get bored with it. Or just find something better, find something more interesting. If you're thinking and your dog comes up, wanting a bit of affection, and you stroke your dog. If you stroke your dog, or your little child, maybe a better example, your child comes up, wants attention, and you just take him in your arms, give him a cuddle, and you'll find your mind becomes restful. At least if you do it with full attention. And if you do it with half attention, neither your dog nor your child will be satisfied. It wants daddy's attention, total, doesn't it? Daddy's or mummy's attention. Child, you can't deceive him. He knows. So does the dog. Now, your question was how to deal with the mind. Well, of course I can talk all day about meditation, but really common sense. In fact, one of my more successful videos is called Common Sense Meditation. And it's explaining just exactly what I'm trying to say now. That just listening, looking, and feeling your feet on the ground is as effective as anything. You don't need to go to some guru in India and dress up in robes and incense and do all those sort of things. Here and now, exactly where you are. That which you seek is right here now, in the present moment. You can never be closer to God than here and now.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes some sense. Yeah. I guess I wanted to ask you about ASMR for a moment, if you don't mind.
No, of course.
Obviously, that's my audience.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah,
No,
I
you're good.
didn't get the point. Sorry, I wandered off. I'm trying to do that. Well, you see, ASMR. I don't know about the tingling aspect. I've never experienced that, but I know a lot about coming to rest. Well, going to sleep is very similar to meditation. And here I'm talking about a bit more than just the first few steps in meditation, because both bring the mind to rest. When you fall asleep, you go to a lower state of consciousness, not complete unconsciousness, but the mind comes to rest, at least when you're not dreaming, deep sleep. In meditation, the same thing happens, but instead of falling asleep, you fall awake to a higher level of consciousness, where similarly the mind is at rest. It leaves mental activity behind, rather like an aeroplane leaves the clouds behind. You see, the mind is like clouds. And sometimes it's so thick you can't see anything but clouds. You quite forget about the blue sky, the infinite blue sky beyond. But what happens? You get in an aeroplane, and you leave the busy airport, all the chaos of the world. Go, bless my soul, beyond the clouds, there's the skies and the infinite sky. You look down, oh, it's just clouds. That's meditation. And the meditation is just like an airplane. It takes you through the clouds of the mind into that. So you have rest from the mind. Just like when you go to sleep, you've had rest from the mind. But there you go down. In meditation, you go up to a higher level of consciousness. In sleep, you go to a lower level of consciousness. So maybe just because I've spent so much of my life in meditation, practiced so much and so long, something in my just general what I conveys that rest to the mind, that for those who are looking for an ASMR experience to help them go to sleep, has that effect. So I see the two as very similar, really. Either way, depending what your aim, if you want to go to sleep, it's splendid. Meditation is very helpful. In fact, many people, when they meditate, very difficult to tell whether you're asleep or meditating. I'm not sure myself which it is sometimes.
when you first discovered ASMR, that there was people listening to ASMR, how did you feel? Was
I
it?
had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
I was with Phil, the man that makes my videos. Neither of us knew what it was. But then gradually we met a few people who told us a bit about it, and suddenly it all began to make sense to me, particularly the going to sleep side, because it's all to do with rest. Yes, we don't know much about mental rest, really. We've become sort of so habituated to mental unrest, restlessness. The world is characterized by restlessness, isn't it? And people go to great effort to try to find peace. They forget that peace is underneath their feet. Nothing could be simpler than finding peace. But we are sort of rather like we're addicted to agitation and not being present. We're absent from presence, you see. We're absent from whatever you call present, just being here and now, expanded into the presence of God. You see, we're absent. We're not present, and this is the base of our problems. We're lost sheep, absent. So we need to come back home to presence, which is here now.
And you weren't, when you first heard that people were using your videos for
Yes.
sleep, let's say,
Yeah,
even though I have to say the biggest comment on my channel and on your videos as well is, I came for sleep, but I stayed for the wisdom. And most people say they cannot sleep through your videos because they're just thinking about all the things you're talking about. I mean, that must be, I guess, to me, that's the highest compliment you could give somebody in your position.
Really?
That people come to fall asleep, but they're so engaged with what they're listening to. And your voice is so relaxing, and you're the way you speak and everything about you, but what you're talking about is so engaging. And like, even just sitting here, like, I've learned so many new things that I just did not know. Like, it's common sense to you, and it's common sense when I hear it, but I doesn't enter my brain. I need someone like you to say it. Tell me.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Amazing, really.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned Phil Shankland, your right-hand man. I believe he came across one of your books in Sheffield, and he came for a visit, and you guys went and meditated, and then he decided to move here. How does that feel? I find it hard to get some of my friends to even come and visit me, and yet you had a man that doesn't even know you come and move beside you so he could meditate with you and help you with your channel. How does that feel? Is it? There's something about you that people just want to be near you. And
It's been a puzzle to me for many years. Why I've often said to him, why do people come? What do they come for? I couldn't think what they came for. And then I remember on one occasion I asked someone who'd been here a few times, and I said to you, why do you come? And she thought a bit and then said, nothing. And that's why some people call me Mr. Nothing. I rather like that. I think it's a good description, because I don't feel I have anything really to give to people. It seems so obvious to me now that we live in this world of of these sort of objects, of this transitory objects of this world that comes to pass. This world which is like crystallized, the crystallized precipitation of the invisible world. The real world, you see, is this infinite presence, spirit. And this has fallen to a lower state of consciousness, rather like rain falls from the sky. First of all, you have water vapor, then it forms clouds. The clouds fall as rain. The rain forms puddles and rivers and things. And then in winter, it freezes. We're really living in a world of frozen or crystallized spirit. And that's why we're locked into solid, separate, broken fragments called separation, separate people. Millions of separate fragments of the one primal, one undivided spirit. Because the sky is not divided, is it? The sky is one sky, so it's spirit. God's one, unity. Again, I'm wandering off an attack of my own. What was your question, Jab? I forget what you asked me.
I can't even remember what I asked. So that was great. Don't worry. That was great. I had, one thing that struck me is you've talked a few times about having a few profound spiritual experiences throughout your life. I wondered if you could maybe tell us about one of those for a minute, or your favorite one.
Again, I find this rather a difficult question. Most of my life has been a multitude of sort of very mini realizations, really. I think anyone that's really interested better read my books because they are recorded. Because even from quite a young man, I suppose everybody has these rather special moments, and I happened to write them down on anything I had handy at the time, and that's really what's developed into my 10 books. Yes, I'm not one of these people that had a mind-blowing experiences, really. Well, maybe I've had one or two. But most of my life it's just been a little gradual, step-by-step progress, unfoldment. There was an occasion when I was 40 years ago now, when I remember first looking into the eyes of a woman and seeing into the infinite beyond. That was a big moment for me. Yes, I speak easily now about the infinite beyond. It seems obvious to me now. But I suppose up till the age of my middle 40s, it wasn't as obvious.
And when that happened, did you know instantly what you were looking at?
No, I was completely thrown by it. I was sort of suddenly thrown into another world. It seemed like another world to me then, and I found it very difficult. For many years I was very lost in between sort of this world and out of this world. Yes, it took me many years to bring the two together really comfortably. I went through many years of really dreadful depression. At one time I seriously thought I was going mad. Yes, it was a dreadful time. I look back on it with horror, really. And when people write to me or speak to me of their own despair, yes, I've known it too. I know all about the darkness. I'm thankful now, because unless you do, you don't understand. You've got to understand. I think to reach a stage of completion, you need to know as much about the darkness as you do the light. We grow through our suffering, our mistakes. They're there for a purpose. I've no doubt about that now.
Do you think everyone's had a spiritual experience? Do you think we all?
Yes, everyone to some extent, because every time someone opens a window and, that's better. It's a spiritual experience, isn't it? Or it says something that may not be beautiful, but if something's lovely, It's a spiritual experience, the beginning of it, isn't it? Oh, that's lovely. Well, you look at the sunset or something, just a flower. Because after all, what is spiritual experience? It's just what's natural. Look in a dog's eyes.
You spoke once with Ian about a lamb. That you had a lamb once that came up and put his head in your lap.
It wasn't a lamb, it was a ram.
Or ram.
I can't really say what it was. It was a very deeply moving experience. Yes, as a farmer, I've lived most of my active years with animals. I loved animals, feel close to them, had many deeply moving experiences with animals. Yes, I always feel animals are angels, really, it's a big problem. You see, why do wild animals run away from people? This has always been a cause of shame to me. What is it about man? Almost everyone, on almost every occasion, when you encounter a wild animal, it'll run away from you. Why is that? What is it about man that's so frightening, so off-putting to an animal? I've puzzled over this one for much of my life. What is so shameful about man that nature's afraid of him? And another great lesson to answer this question, what's a spiritual experience? As a young farmer, I remember walking across my field of grass and realizing that my feet hurt the grass, damaged the grass, crushed the grass, hurt it. And I've always, I've always recognized what we call fairies, the unseen, spirits of nature. Why is it that they can sit on flowers and I can't? Why can't I be a fairy? And it was that really that made me think about what is man? Why am I encased in this clumsy great body that can't walk across the lovely grass without hurting it? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be a fairy? Why can't I live among nature which I love without hurting it, without the wild animals running away from me? What is this disease called John Butler that so many people are proud of, for God's sake? We think man's the pinnacle of creation instead of the pits. Now, this is a most important spiritual realization, my dear. If you can get that under your belt and start off from, instead of what's right with me, human rights, myself, I've, entitled to this, that, and the other, start considering what's wrong with me. You're on much safer ground then. And then that you might sort of get a hint that there's something called spirit. Body, mind, and spirit. We tend to live in body and mind. Well, that's just the beginning. What about spirit? And that's when you get to my age, it's only too obvious I'm dying out. Am I dying out, or is the body dying out? Do I die? The body dies out. My mind is getting a bit sort of muddled now. I'm as alive as I've ever been. Ageless. Spirit.
This is a question that I've gotten a little help with from Phil, but do you prefer animals to people?
The wonderful thing about love is that it expands and expands and expands. And ultimately, what is not lovable in this world? You see, love, we always start off with I love you, which is really the world of separation, isn't it? It's the first sort of step. It's you're going in the right direction. But see, both I and you are transitory creatures. And as we all know in love, you love someone and then usually love tends to sort of wane a bit, or she says she doesn't love you. That's human love. But real love is, it really belongs to this infinite. We talk of the love of God, don't you? Well, for God's sake, what does that mean? It meant nothing to me as a young man. Now I'm old, it seems the most obvious of all statements, really, that this presence, this infinite space, in fact, is love. You know, when I look at you or you look at me, because we're both being attentive at the moment, we're both giving each other full attention, well, not pretty much as we can, attention. And what's flowing from our eyes? Isn't it love? Because it's natural. It loves every hair of your head, doesn't it? Every wrinkle, every blemish, warts and all. You cannot not. It is a primal principle of creation. So whoever one's looking at, even if you think he's awful when you're thinking about him, just let thinking subside and use your common sense to see what's in front of you. You'll find you love it. You love the very dust under your feet, don't you? It's not. You love every worm.
Just going back to the your point about you trotting on the grass and that you wanted to not, destroy nature. A sheep, a lamb, a ram, they will also trot on grass.
Yes.
So is the difference that our humans' consciousness, is that the difference to you, or?
It's all very clearly explained in the Bible, in the beginning, the first chapters of Genesis, you see. If we come back here to being present, you see, it's happening. I wonder if people watching this video will feel it. This stillness is present, isn't it? You recognize it, and I do. It's become evident between us, hasn't it? Now, this has no end, does it? It fills this space we're sitting in. It's dark outside now, but it passes through the walls, fills the valley. It contains the whole world, doesn't it? This infinite presence. And it's not divided. There's just one, isn't there? One sky in which the whole world is contained. So it said God holds the whole world in his hand. So it is. One infinite spirit. Now this is going to die out. It's already dying out. You can see it. Look at me. There's an old man. It's dying out. And what's left when this dies? That, isn't it? Now this is called John Butler. This is just I am. Now I am is the name of God. Name of Jesus. I am that I am. Now that is undivided. Now in that not only men are contained, but the whole world is contained. All the animals and everything. Now when man falls from that into separation, falls down into this body which is full of decay, will rot away. This is food for worms. That's the fate of John Butler. And of everyone, incidentally, to be eaten by worms. Yes, take that on board, my friends, no escape. This is the destiny of our much vaunted man or woman, humanity. In our fall, this is why that we talk of the fall from paradise. You see, in the paradise, man is undivided. One man, singular, Adam. And then gradually, consciousness fell. And so what happened to the creation? He brought it with him, you see. And so the whole of creation is infected, just like a disease, with this dis-ease of man, which is separation. So all the creatures are corrupted with the same disease. So nature exists by killing and eating one another. The whole thing is just like man has to feed himself. In the real world, you don't have an appetite. There's no killing or eating in the real world, in spirit. All this happens in this lower world of separation. Because we're separated from the source of life, which is spirit, and we've fallen into this separate thing, we're cut off from the source of life, and so we have to, feed yourself physically. Physical body requires physical food. And we look out at life not with the true spiritual vision. We look out through these eyes of flesh. What you see through these eyes is spiritual blindness. You don't see the real world at all. To see the real world, you've got to see with insight, or the eyes of the heart. Because it's not visible in terms of that you can describe. It's indescribable. It's beyond description. So man brought the whole world down with him. And as it's described in the Bible, God says to Adam, "Cursed is the land for thy sake," see. Now, modern-day ecologists are just about beginning to get the message now that the cause of our poor old world is man. But you see, they've much, much further to go, because man brought death with him, and the wages of sin, which is separation from God, is death. This is why we die. In the real world, there's no death. It's obvious. I've just explained to you why it is. This is the world of death, and this is why all nature dies too, because the world is what we make it, and man has brought this fallen vision of life with him. And so the whole world is infected with man's disease. And hence the fate of the animals too. In the real world, which is timeless and spaceless, we can't think it, you have to realize it. That's why it's called realization, spiritual realization. When you see it, it's unmistakable. It's beyond knowledge, beyond this sort of intellectual knowledge. You realize it. And see, human knowledge is really spiritual ignorance. Real knowledge is what's called faith. This is higher knowledge, so you see it by faith.
There's so many things you could go, so many threads I could go there, but I'm conscious to get to some of the questions that I know my audience wanted as well. I had a man I featured on my channel before. His name is Naval Ravikant, and he said that, according to him, the greatest superpower that any human being can have is being comfortable being alone and being okay being alone and on your own. That's something that you seem to have in abundance. Do you think that's just something with your personality? Is it something you worked on? Do you have any advice for people out there that might struggle? We all have times where we'll be alone.
Well, I'd question the phrase, the greatest superpower a man can have, because how can you have it? How can I have this? It's more a case of it having me, isn't it? The greatest superpower you can perhaps recognize is more, I suggest, more accurate. The superpower, well, why is God called Almighty? Almighty God. But how many gods are there? If you don't like the name God, doesn't matter. Just feel what's present here. undivided presence.
And most of it was kind of advice for you. Like my audience is quite young, and we live in a world of constant distractions, constant. So I'm just, you seem to have all the answers, but I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know how you're just like this, or if this is your life, meditating and traveling the world and experiencing so many things. What do you think? Do you think it's
Made a lot of mistakes, my dear. I made some foolish things. Made a lot of mistakes. That's how we learn, I think. Get it wrong. Pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and start all over again. Yes, I've no easy answers, just live 85 years, I suppose.
hopefully we all can, but
When you look back when I look back on, for example, perhaps most of people who are watching this are no longer children. So let me ask them, where is your childhood? Where is it?
behind us in the past.
See, the interesting fact about life is that we grow out, don't we, of things. I wonder why most merciful God gives us 80-odd years to live. Life is a school. We have to go through many classes in this school. With a bit of luck, we might graduate one day. Perhaps we move on to high school then. Because this life is a very elementary school, isn't it? I assure you, I'm a mere child, spiritual child, a beginner. So, maybe the answer is just be patient. There's an old saying, if you don't like the weather, wait a bit. It'll change sooner or later, won't it? Spring will come one day. So often we just have to be patient. Patient used to be of great virtue. It's not spoken of very much these days. Nature teaches you to be patient. Farming does, doesn't it? You can't hurry the seasons. You sow in hope. You never know what the harvest is going to be. Do your best. What else can you do?
We live in a world now over the pandemic, a term was coined, it's called permacrisis. We live in a world of permacrisis. We go from one crisis to another crisis to another. And you've lived through so much. You've lived through World War. You've been in the army. How is there anything you can? Does this time feel different? Are we living through something new, or is this just? Does it feel different?
It's a pity, really, that the good old-fashioned word sin has become rather sort of unacceptable these days, but I do recommend it to you. It's an excellent word. Sin, and I'm not really, if I've done, in fact, I did this, I think, on my first conscious TV interview, so I'm going to do it again now because it makes a rather good illustration. Well, the trouble is I'm surrounded by 3 lights now, but lights all around me. But, well, the demonstration won't look very real. But if, for example, I start off looking at this light, and then turn away from it like that, you see, and don't look at the other light, I'm then in shadow, aren't I? Here my face is lit, and there it's in shadow. So relative to the light, I'm in darkness. So I don't know. Light I know, I can see, and here I can't see, I'm in darkness. So I project the works of darkness. Got it? Now then. Yeah, I'm in light. There's no problem. I can see. And here I can't see. So I've got to go and be educated and get mixed up and pick up all these human ideas and get mental indigestion because I'm living in a world of dark. In the world of dark, the blind lead the blind. And this is the world, and that's salvation, or heaven, or God, or whatever you want to call it. Light and dark. And it's just a matter of which way you're turned. And so this is salvation and this is sin. Sin is a word for turning away from the light into darkness. And in dark, because this is life, this is death. And what we need to do, and this is the old-fashioned word, repent. Repent is simply turning back to the light. So you see, is the world in a state of crisis? Well, the world is in a state of ignorance. The world is ignorance because we're not where we belong, which is in the light. This is why I've got a body, and my body is going to be eaten by worms, whatever I do, because this is a body of sin. It's corrupt, therefore it's diseased, as is everybody else in this world. This is death, this is mortality. And the whole world is cursed with this disease of man called mortality. That's why the whole world dies. Why does the world, what can do it? Turn back to the light, so spirit is raised to the world of immortality. In immortality there's no death, there's no crisis. The crisis is self-made by man's own ignorance. It's a product of me, and right at the centre of it is this thing called the ego, which is me, John Butler. And because me is separate from real life, which is absence of me, the one I truly am, the immortal man, then the only one to blame for the world is me. And this is what's called the ego. And the ego is another word for the old-fashioned word, the devil. And the devil is L-I-V-E, live, spelled back to front, E-V-I-L. So this world is back to front, it is upside down, back to front, the wrong way round, and all the rest of it. And that's what we call crisis. And it always will be until man turns back this way, which is called, in Christian language, salvation or enlightenment.
Do you think humans need a certain amount of ego to know yourself, or is all ego bad?
The ego only really exists, see, in the absence of light. In a way, the more awful life is, the more some people at least feel motivated to try to find something better, don't they, or find an answer. So I suppose in that sense, yes, it plays a part. Willy-nilly, whether we want it or not, we've got it, haven't we? Is it necessary or not? Well, this is our human condition. Is there a purpose for it? Well, dear, God knows and I do not. It's a very useful little phrase, God knows. Gets you off the hook, doesn't it? I don't know.
My research of you, one word kept coming up for me, and that word was pioneer. I don't know if you feel like you're a pioneer. You started organic farming in the 1970s, back 20, 30 years before it was fashionable. You ran a meditation studio in your 40s, again, before anybody was talking about meditation. Do you feel like a pioneer? Do you feel like someone who's discovering new things?
I think even before I wanted to be a cowboy, I wanted to be a pioneer as a boy. Yeah, I saw myself taking my axe out, and in those days, pioneers felled the forests down. Now they go out and plant them, don't they? But yes, I was sort of going out to Canada, being a lumberjack. I always loved working with an axe. No, but more seriously, well, it was serious at the time, dead serious. Well, I don't see myself as a pioneer, but it always brings a smile to my face when people say I was. I wasn't I didn't start organic farming, but I was certainly there at the beginning of it, and yes, I suppose I was one of the first. One of the first. Same with meditation. It's extraordinary. I've seen both organic farming and meditation flourish and become universally accepted. Yes, they were both. People laughed at you. People thought I was crazy as a young man. People didn't know what I was talking about. Now everybody does. Yeah.
Another word that came up a lot for me was courage. You seem to be a very brave man. Things you've done, moving to Peru in your mid-20s to become an agriculturalist. You've moved to San Francisco later in life. You had moved to South Africa and just headed out into the wilderness. Did these feel like brave things at the time?
No, I've never been afraid of nature. I've never been afraid of being alone. Spent a lot of time alone in Africa. I'm not afraid of, well, I'm sort of cautious, but I'm not afraid of wild animals and that. The real thing to be afraid of, you see, is the ego. As Jesus says, fear him able to cast your soul into hell, fear him. My God, I echo that in my old age. The ego, my dear, is the cause of all our troubles, the devil within us. If you want to see the devil, look in a mirror. You'll soon see him. That's our enemy. That's the one to fear. Three little things to beware of. The tongue is a naughty thing, you want to be careful with the tongue. Don't talk too much. When you hear your tongue saying I, me, or mine, beware. Those are things to be afraid of. They will lead you down. If it's a very, very good start to spiritual life to notice how often your tongue says I, me, mine, and recognizing that every time you do that, you are building up this sense of separation. In the real world, there's no separate I. There's no ego. Even in an interview, there's part of me that cringes whenever I say, I think. I wish I hadn't, but it's gone. The naughty tongue said it before I came able to stop it. That's the thing to be afraid of. I'd face all the lions and snakes in the world rather than... That's the real monster. Even other people aren't as bad as your own. The poison starts in here. All the bombs in the world aren't as frightening as this monster.
That's the same for a lot of people. Yeah, I just still trying to rack my brain to think of things like I'm very conscious of putting myself in the place of my audience and who and
Yes,
you know
please do.
I've touched on many of the things about we overthink, anxiety, just all of the things that's going on in the world, technology, just constant distractions. Like when I meet you, you just seem to be so in tune with yourself, with everything around you. And I'm trying to figure out, I know there's no easy answer, but if you were someone like me who never kind of experienced spirituality, meditation, constantly distracted, what's the first step, do you think? What would be the first thing you would?
Well, besides just going out for a walk and just getting in touch with nature as far as you can, just go out and stand under a tree, or even better, look at the sky, open the window and look at the sky. You see, lots of us do that sort of automatically without being aware of it, or with just 1 or 2% of our attention, but we continue to think. I started to meditate when I was 26 years old. So I've got 60 years of twice daily meditation under my belt. That's helped a lot. That's probably the cornerstone of my spiritual life. And people don't always realize that meditation has two aspects. There's what's called the inner turn, when you use a mantra or something to discover the space within yourself. But there's also the outer turn, which consists of giving attention. And it needs to be, you see, attention, we're normally so inattentive. We attend really not even with half our mind, just almost no attention. We're distracted, pulled here, there, and everywhere. So to learn to be more attentive is a very, very good thing. You know, a very good thing that women all used to do years ago was to knit and sew. My mother did it all her life. It's a wonderful natural meditation when you have to pay attention, otherwise you make the stitch wrong. Or people who draw. Drawing is a very good way, or writing by hand, which unfortunately we don't do much these days. Anything that will bring your attention to, sharpen your attention is very, very, very helpful. I was so lucky on the farm. I was born in the time when most farm work was done by hand. People worked by hand, used scythes, hoes, axes and things, all of which you have to be attentive or you do it wrong. Look at the lovely old wooden pews where I hope they show up in the video. See how that woodwork was done by a man with a chisel, carefully working away with attention. Well, that's a wonderful natural meditation that will help counteract this out-of-control mind that we're plagued with these days. Keep your feet on the ground in the sense of attend to what's in front of you. See what's in front of your nose. The old sayings are full of this, aren't they? Pay attention. When I learned carpentry as a young man, I remember Dad saying, hit the nail on the head, otherwise it goes in crooked, doesn't it? Or when you're cutting up vegetables, pay attention, otherwise the knife will cut your finger off or something. Those things are such valuable lessons. Get interested in something. See, when you love something, you will naturally give it attention. That's why to follow your heart is such a good thing to do. Find something in life that you love. You know, it's not only between man and women, not only sexual, but something you love doing, something you're interested in. Then you'll give attention to it. I used to love working on the land.
So I guess if you'd never meditated before, would doing something with your hands seems like a
Well,
good jumping off?
see, we say we've never meditated, but see, everybody really meditates naturally. We cannot not meditate. We live in an attractive part, a bit of a tourist centre, and people drive here for the weekend. There's a nice river. They sit by the river, they eat fish and chips and feed the ducks. It just gets them out of their routine, and they have a nice day, have a lovely day. Go home, feel better. It's called having a holiday, isn't it? Holiday is really a holy day, isn't it? It gets us out of our routine, and you see things as it were for the first time. That was the old idea of having a day off work, wasn't it? Sunday was a day when you put God first. Now most of that's been swept away. But then one extreme leads to the other, and the more unnatural we get in our lives, then the more instinctively people yearn for the natural, don't they? And they discover that nature's all around them, really. And that's why people are so anxious not to destroy it now. They're suddenly beginning to value it, thank God. Getting to realise that it's a good idea not to cover it all with asphalt and buildings and motor cars. Thank God. We usually learn at the 11th hour, don't we? Things happen naturally, really. Some people take meditation more seriously, but the trouble with giving names to things, especially rather sort of specialist names like meditation, you think it's this rather than that. It tends to be divisive. Whereas meditation is really as natural as breathing. Every time you lift your eyes to the horizon is meditation, isn't it? You're turning to something bigger than yourself. Turning to something beautiful, something that makes you feel better. All this is natural meditation.
But I presume you'd have to be at your attention on what you're looking at. If you're looking at something and your mind is thinking of other things, is that meditation? Would you?
Yes, it's sort of inattentive meditation, but it's better than nothing, isn't it? It's very difficult to give full attention. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
We do our best. If you have a knife and you're not too stupid, you'll try not to cut yourself. It's a good exercise in meditation to do something with a knife and not cut your finger off. Well, that's eating a meal. You try to spear the right thing on a fork, don't you? Pay attention enough to do that. No, my dear, just life itself.
I know this is going to seem like a silly question to you, but before we started, you meditated a little when you were sitting here. Do you think of other things when you're meditating, or is your mind just...
No, dear, because I did that because we were talking, and I felt we were rather wasting time because it was just ordinary sort of social chit-chat, wasn't it, about nothing really. And I suppose at most periods of our life we have an aim, and you see what is useful and what is useless. There's a discrimination between what you want and what you don't want. What is useful to that aim and what isn't. So you tend to choose the companions and what favours whatever it is you're aiming at. I wanted to give attention to what we're talking about. I wanted to give my best to this interview. So I didn't want my mind to be distracted really by other things. So I stopped talking and I turned within. I just reconnected with this infinite presence, which I feel within myself as well as outwardly. And with that comes a feeling of safety. It's like a rock, an invisible rock that you can hold to, a security. And however stupid things may come out of my mouth, if I have at least some connection with this infinite rock, this infinite infallibility within myself, then the fallibility of what comes out of my mouth will be less so, won't it? I wouldn't dare rely too much on what I say, but if what lies behind what I say is connected to this infinite reality, then it's more likely to be worth hearing than if it was just coming out of here. I suppose that's what makes people listen to what I say, because it's not really what I'm saying, it's what arises from that infinite depth within, which has been gradually come to realization through many years of practice and meditation and attention.
Okay, John. So you mentioned earlier you've written 10 books, 8 of them published. I have one here. You were explaining to me before. So this is introducing spiritual unfoldment, and this is, as you're saying, it's kind of parts of all of your books put together, kind of excerpts from all of your different books put together. And this is kind of, well, I'll let you explain. You'll be much better.
Well, we produced this in the hope that it might encourage. You see, most people know me through the videos rather than through my books, but actually the books contain much, 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 much more than is possible in the videos. And anyone that's really interested in this meditation and wants to know more, and perhaps more, and perhaps better presented than can be done with this just speaking impromptu. And often I forget. I wish I'd said things. I forget to say things or get it wrong or muddled up. So anyone that really takes seriously and wants to know more about the central message, I'd very much encourage them to consider reading the books. And the books aren't at all a product of this. I said that as a young man I started, of course in those days we used to write long letters by hand, and many of those have been kept. And from quite a young age I made notes of special moments in my life, and so I had quite a collection of these, and this is really, when I put them together, these formed my first books. And then I've had a very interesting life. I've been all over the world and had many adventures and recorded much, if not all of these, in diaries and long letters I wrote home. And so this constitutes my books. And also through 60 years of meditation, I've had many, many, many what you could call spiritual insights, which I've also recorded because I always carry a notebook with me. And I recognize these come from a higher level of consciousness and therefore have got special value. And so, as I said, anyone that wishes to sort of trace, you were asking, sorry, this is what happens when I'm talking, because I jump from one thing to the other. You see, particularly young people that want to know how to progress in the spiritual life, I cannot do better than to offer the example of my own life, in which you'll see how many mistakes I've met and what I've gone through. This doesn't mean the same will happen to you, because we're all different, but you'll see how it's just a very typical human, how it is that we grow and develop, and how in spite of our own stupidity, somehow we grow. Anyway, I produced this little thing here, which contains extracts of my 10 books in the hope it would sort of whet the appetite of anyone who wants to study the subject in more detail, and encourage them to buy and read the books. In fact, I'm just starting now to make some, it's going to be called the Book Club, and another American woman actually has started interviewing me. We'll be making a series of chapter by chapter interviews to bring out a fuller meaning of the books. And anyone that contacts us, we'll send them a copy of this, a free PDF of this. And yes, so this is available to anyone who just send us an email, contact us.
And we'll put all those links in the description. We'll have a link to your
yes,
and to your YouTube channel. So I'll encourage everyone, if you're not already subscribed to John, I can't believe you haven't, but please subscribe to him. We'll have links to all of your books. You have a newsletter as well.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all that. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
And incidentally, if we have your email, we'll then, if you'd like to, you can then receive a fairly regular sort of newsletter that we send out, which we hope is of interest. You can stop it at any time if you get fed up with it.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, John. I would like to, I'll end by saying a few thank yous to people. Obviously, thanks to yourself. But this interview would not have been possible without Phil Shankland, who's over there, for helping and set up and arrange this interview. Ian McNay and Conscious TV for their help and support and all their advice. As I mentioned, the website, John's website, Spiritual Unfoldment, will be in the description. Link to his channel. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, John. This has been an absolute pleasure. I can't believe it. It's so surreal to be here talking with you after all this time. And yeah, thank you so much for everything.
Well, thank you, John. You've been a brilliant interviewer. You brought good questions and listened very considerately and see.
Well, hopefully we get to do this again sometime. I'll come back with even more better questions next time. So. Because if you ever want to come to Vancouver, you're more than welcome.
God willing.